All right, well, it looks like this is going to be fairly intimate. Thank you for being here, those of you who are. My name is Michael Levkowitz. I'm going to be talking about Washington State coastal resilience efforts and collaboration, incorporating climate change impacts into decision making. And I will be moderating the session today. So just a little bit about the session. I'll be giving the first talk about building coastal community resilience through effective partnerships. I'm talking about our Coastal Hazards Resilience Network. I'm going to turn it over to Julie Morse, Dr. Guillaume Mauger, and Dr. Eric Grossman before we have a discussion panel at the end. Feel free to ask any clarification questions during the presentations. I think it's going to be pretty casual, especially with this many people. But we will have time for a discussion panel at the end, so anything real substantive you might want to save. So the focus of our session is going to be on the value of the Coastal Hazards Resilience Network, especially in light of the increased attention to coastal resilience that we're seeing at the federal level right now. Having a group like the CHRN to inform conversations on the local level and to help develop the infrastructure to identify priorities can help prepare communities to jump on funding opportunities when they do arise, which we're hoping to see more of in the next couple of years. So with that, we'll jump right in here. So a little bit of background on the network. We knew that there were a lot of different people working for a lot of different agencies and nonprofits that were doing great work already on coastal resilience issues. And there was a need to sort of increase communication and collaboration between those different people. There was a lot of overlapping work. So that was sort of the foundational motivation for this. So Washington's Coastal Management Program at the Department of Ecology and Washington Sea Grant came together to work on a grant application that was through NOAA's Coastal Resilience Network grant program, the CREST grant program, to develop the CHRN in 2013. And that funding gave us the capacity to really pull it together and organize ongoing events and maintenance of the website and all that good stuff. So we outlined two specific objectives in the grant proposal. The first one was to create a resilience network, obviously, and the second one is to increase understanding of coastal hazard vulnerability and to strengthen local capacity to improve coastal resilience in Southwest Washington. So now I'll talk a little bit about how it is that we're working to meet those objectives. So the network itself is a regional partnership supporting vulnerable communities. It's really being done by advising local planners and connecting them to existing tools that are already out there. Again, just trying to overcome the lack of coordination between the diverse programs working on things like multi-hazard planning, preparedness, response, and recovery within Washington State. The primary functions of the network include information sharing and sharing of science and policy expertise through things like the network's website, the listserv, social media, and in-person meetings. For members, one of the key benefits of the group is increased awareness of what other entities are doing. It allows for the easier transfer of knowledge. It's sort of a place where you can go to ask other people for help. It's not uncommon, for example, to get emails out over the listserv, network members asking others for help with measuring erosion or sea level rise or other technical measurements in specific areas, asking other members for help. It's also helpful as a sort of conduit for identifying and jumping on funding partnerships and partnering on those funding opportunities. Recently, some network members came together to apply for a NOAA resilience grant, and it was their previous experience working with each other and knowing what the others were doing that gave them sort of the base knowledge that allowed them to partner on that grant application. So that's kind of the basic concept of the network. And the next slide will talk a little bit about some of the network participants. So Sea Grant and the Ecology coastal management staff collaborated to identify the stakeholders that should be invited to an initial round of recruitment. This initial list of participants included representatives and individuals from emergency management, coastal development, and coastal management, community development, and others working in planning for natural and coastal hazards. And there was a lot of conversation among that initial group of people about how to move forward with the network, whether it should be more inclusive or more exclusive.
Can we put the micro closer to you?
Oh, the mic, yeah, absolutely. So those conversations focused on what the value of the group was going to be. They wanted to make sure that we didn't have a listserv that was full of emails no one was reading. We didn't want to duplicate the work of other groups that were already in existence. What was decided was that the group would be best served as a larger, more inclusive group, open to really any practitioners within the field that were interested in joining. So the network expanded to include groups like the Nature Conservancy, Emergency Management Division, NOAA, Department of Commerce, Oregon State University. We're going to speed it up because there are 54 active network members currently. Not read all of those. So that's a little bit about who's in the network, and now we'll dive into the ways in which they interact with one another and with local communities. So here's our website, wacoastalnetwork.com. There's kind of a snapshot of what the website looks like. The website has a resources section, which include different tools that are out there. I'm sure you've heard lots about the different tools, interactive maps, data portals, applications, stuff of that nature. Reports, which has papers, publications, and presentations that were either written by network members or just relevant to network members. Our current project section is a place to really highlight the work of network members, oftentimes linking to other websites that have much more detailed information, but it's a place to just show what network members are working on. There's a blog on there. The blog is updated about once a week. Blog posts are CHRN updates, relevant links that we found to coastal hazards or resilience issues, stuff of that nature. Our membership page is actually really useful. It has brief bios about the network members and contact information that people can use when they're trying to figure out who might be able to assist them with a particular project. And our conferences page is the most recent addition, information about previous and upcoming conferences with CHRN hosted sessions or talks. So this entire presentation will be posted there shortly after this weekend. The website gets around 220, 250 unique visitors per week on average. People visit about 6 pages per visit, so we're working on trying to optimize that and make sure that it shows up in searches when people are looking for relevant information. So that's sort of the skeleton of the network. Next few slides we'll talk about some of the ways in which the network has actually been involved in activities on the ground. So one of the ways that the network has worked to achieve the second objective that I outlined earlier, which is increasing understanding of coastal hazard vulnerability and strengthening local capacity to improve coastal resilience in Southwest Washington, was joining FEMA for their community resilience meetings, which is part of their risk mapping process. The meetings were geared towards improving local officials' understanding of flood risk and helping them develop plans to communicate that risk and help create or improve mitigation plans, make informed decisions about local development policies, and create a sustainable long-term vision for their watershed. So these meetings were going to happen regardless of the network's involvement, but the planning team for the network saw this as a really great opportunity, recognizing that these communities have a very limited capacity and that they were already going to have a lot of important players from local communities in a room. There was value in bringing representation from other agencies that were doing connected work, and also adding erosion as a hazard to be discussed in the meetings, because that's a major problem for these communities, and FEMA wasn't otherwise going to be talking about it. So the network helped provide pre-meeting outreach to start to build relationships with the local emergency management officials, and followed up after the meetings to help communities really get going on the different hazards that were discussed during the meetings and the priorities that were presented. The planning team also used these meetings as a way of identifying communities that would be open to receiving further assistance and in need of further assistance in addressing coastal resilience issues. The network's involvement helped shape these meetings into the model that's being used throughout the state, and the network planning team is continuing to sit in on these meetings as they take place throughout Washington. 2 individual areas were selected by the CHRN so far for further assistance based on need, capacity, and their willingness to work with the network. I'll talk about those projects a little bit more over the last few slides here, and how the CHRN technical expertise and resources were leveraged to assist those communities before I turn it over to a few of our network members to discuss their own projects and the ways in which the network has assisted them in their work. So the first community is Washaway Beach. The beach is eroding about 100 feet per year on average. If that sounds like a lot, it's because it is. It's the fastest eroding shoreline on the Pacific coast. 3 homes were lost during the course of just a single week in the winter storm season of 2014. That served as sort of a focusing event, reminding people that this was a really big issue. And it was really hard for me to conceptualize, but the homes are falling onto the beach and then the homes are washing into the ocean. They're just disappearing. On average, they're losing about 12 parcels of land annually. So the drastically eroding shoreline is jeopardizing the ecosystem in obvious ways. It's pulling all sorts of pollution from their septic systems that are on the shoreline to the homes themselves, to lots of trash that is being dumped into the homes once they're being abandoned, all out into the ocean, and it's simultaneously threatening the livelihood of the coastal residents that are living in the area. There have been lots of previous attempts to respond to the erosion, but it's a really complicated issue, and there's limited local capacity. The county has oftentimes ignored the area because it's expensive and they kind of see it as a sunk cost. The reality on the ground is homes are falling into the water and they're by and large being ignored. So after a FEMA risk map meeting, county officials expressed a renewed desire to take action on these issues. It was still apparent that they didn't have the capacity to really do so, but their willingness and the opportunity to really have a large impact made them an ideal opportunity for CHRN to get involved. So the network helped to ensure that there was a coordinated response connecting different stakeholders from within Ecology and within the various agencies that are working on these issues to make sure that there was a response strategy both for the immediate future and for removing future debris that was coordinated between different agencies. So Ecology dedicated a Hershman Marine Policy Fellow, my predecessor, to research and develop a report assessing the boundaries of responsibility for properties before, during, and after buildings fall onto the beach. So as you can see, and would guess, property owners are primarily responsible before their homes are passed by the line of ordinary high tide there. Once the line of ordinary high tide sort of passes the homes, you've got Washington State Parks taking primary jurisdiction. Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps also have a role at that point. Once the line of extreme low tide has passed the home, it falls on DNR, with continuing overlapping issues with Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps. So as you might expect, there was a lot of buck passing involved. Nobody really wanted to take responsibility for this. It's a really expensive thing to clean up these homes and remove them from the shoreline. Tracking property owners down to hold them responsible has been really difficult because there aren't actually ordinances that allow them to do that effectively. So the Ecology dedicated a fellow, and part of that money came from the CREST grant originally, so this is all sort of connected to the network in that way. Another thing the fellow discovered in the course of researching this area was that the local government had never legally established an erosion hazard area, which also created lots of issues. There was confusion around whether or not people could get development permits. A lot of them were rejected, but then some people figured out that there wasn't actually legal grounds for being rejected, so there was some further development in the area. There's a lot of confusion around whether or not people were eligible to receive insurance payouts from the flood insurance program, the National Flood Insurance Program. So using CREST funds, the CHRN contracted George Kaminsky, who's a geomorphologist at Ecology and a network member, along with another network member from Oregon State, to measure erosion rates in the area and develop erosion hazard maps for the community, allowing them to prevent further development and sort of laying the groundwork for more accurate planning moving forward. So a little bit about, oh, sorry, that was a slide that I was supposed to put up a while ago. So there are sort of the predicted erosion rates. This is a draft from George Kaminsky. You can see it's drastic. Looking at what there's 2028 right there and 2053 in blue.
Would you like us to wait for questions till after?
If you have clarification, feel free. I mean, if it's more sure, what's up?
I'll wait till you're done with just the specific project.
Okay. So Ocean Shores in Grays Harbor County, Washington was another community that's received a lot of direct support. So a little bit of background, you can see right here, these are geotubes. These were installed in the mid-90s in response to a rapidly eroding shoreline. It was supposed to be a temporary solution, a one-year solution. A lot of these homes that you see along the shoreline up here were already in place. And there was concern in the community that winter storms in a specific year in the mid-90s, I think it was 95, were going to damage the homes. So they put in these geotubes as a temporary solution. An accretion pattern started, and the shoreline actually pushed out further away from here. These were all covered in sand, and out of sight, out of mind, people kind of forgot about the issue. So for 20 years, you saw future development. This gigantic condominium was built after the geotubes were installed. So people just sort of saw it as a great place to develop once again. That accretion cycle ended, as you might have guessed. Erosion started again, and in 2014, a major storm event exposed the geotubes. They were ripping and tearing and falling apart as they were supposed to. The mayor declared a state of emergency, and this was all right around the time that one of these resilience meetings was scheduled to occur. So again, Ecology's geomorphologist George Kaminsky helped present coastal erosion hazard information at the resilience meetings. He was contracted to develop erosion maps for that area as well, since they did not have them. They're really necessary to developing an effective response strategy. The network's planning team helped to identify and recruit coastal management experts to attend technical meetings with the mayor, key agency experts, and local stakeholders to discuss their potential short-term response options in the immediate future. So what they came to after initially considering all sorts of hard shoreline armoring was geobags, which are slightly smaller versions of the geotubes over there, also as a temporary solution. The network is continuing to work with the community to develop longer term solutions. One of the things that they're doing, working with Army Corps of Engineers and Ecology, is installing sand fencing along the coastline to hopefully capture some of the sand blowing off the shoreline and start to develop new sand dunes that will protect the homes. And the network is continuing to sit in on these technical advisory meetings as they figure out what they're going to do long term. So moving forward, the network is trying to expand to include more local government representation and tribal officials into the network. We see that as sort of a weak spot in an area where we need to expand. We're really trying to identify how it is that we can get all of these different people that are working on resilience to work together kind of in one motion. So developing a set of resilience priorities, both within and across stakeholder groups, for the future funding requests and allocations is one of the goals for the network this year. And sharing lessons learned and best practices to advise anyone outside of Washington State who's interested in developing a similar network so they can do it efficiently and effectively. And it kind of goes without saying, but one of the other benefits of the network is sort of being able to identify what it is that different network members are currently working on and giving them an opportunity to present at today's conference and share their work in a forum that they might not otherwise be able to share it in. So that's a little bit about the network, and now I'm going to turn it over to our other network members to have them talk about their projects and the value of the network. But I guess I could take a quick question now.
Mine's more comment more than question. So I manage the two conservation districts in Pacific and Grays Harbor. And at Washaway Beach, if you want to go back to that map.
I'm worried now. Remember, I'm new here.
Yeah, so this whole area, for people that don't know, the beach used to go all the way down here, and there was actually another lip just like Tokeland was over here. It was a whole town. There was roads, infrastructure, and everything, and it's all gone now.
When was that, a long time ago or during your life?
Well, the last remnants finally, right down, I think over here, finally went away 2000, the last little bit. So this is not a new phenomenon, and a lot of it has to do with the channel being dredged. So this road here is a major thoroughway for going up the beach. DOT has already said they're not going to let this road go away. So it'll never get to these other levels. They will, and there's been a suggestion to go over the hill and go around. That's just way too expensive. They'll just rock it in. And what we've suggested, one point is that we want to rock and plant much like they do down at Benson Beach, down in Pacific. To do that here, it's very expensive, but that's the only way to mitigate and stop this. But one of the problems is that FEMA will not pay for recovery of these buildings until the buildings go in the water. And we've tried to get our legislators to allow to have them paid for to be cleaned up before they go in the water. They will not do that. So, and to keep in mind, when these houses, one of the problems, I know that it is a turf kind of, nobody wants to deal with it. But the problem is when the houses go in the water, they're gone in 24, 48 hours.
Who's insuring those homes?
Well, they can't be insured anymore.
So they're built without any insurance?
Only a couple of the homeowners out there actually have insurance now.
Right, and that's one of the big
Is
issues.
it some risk insurance or is it common insurance?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Does the insurance cover the risk? Are they paying high insurance rates?
They're not even paying because they can't get insured. It's that whole community here. All these houses are, and there's actually been some you see up here, it's a crewing beach up here. And there's a theory out there that since the Army Corps of Engineers, when they dredged the Columbia River in the past, the dredge spoils would go up the beach and then crew up the beach, up Long Beach, then hit up here. Well, now they take all that dredge spoils and they put it on the deep water sites, so that nurturing sediment is not going onto the beach anymore. We've tried to fight with Army Corps to have them put it on the beach. I'm sorry, I'm taking over your thing. I feel bad about that. But it's basically federal level people that are not doing what the locals have recommended for a long period of time. The Army Corps won't even refer to it as dredge spoils.
I'm an old retired professor, and I have a comment. I feel obliged to make the comment. Interesting topics what you have here. You explain some of the topics. This fellow put a lot of preparation in his paper,
Yeah.
and then he rattles it off without any intonation, anything. Nobody could really follow it, at least I didn't. Slow down, talk
Oh,
about
I
that.
think you did.
Important. Learn to speak in front of audience, engage the audience.
Okay.
This is waste of your time preparing good paper and waste of our time not able to comprehend what you are saying.
I appreciate the feedback, and I'm sorry that that was the experience for you. I want to turn it over to some of the other presenters before I waste any more of your time.